Okay, everyone, let's just wait for people to get in and then we'll go. There we go. Perfect. We're also going to check the sound this week as well. Going to England in a couple of weeks. Hello, everyone. Going to England in a couple of weeks, and I'm going to stock up on good sound equipment. So we should be on the way up. Also, we've actually got a thumbnail this week, so production values are soaring. Thank you, Joe Devine, who's also our moderator tonight. Joe is already WhatsApping me. You should see me now. We'll wait. So, most importantly, how is the sound this week for everybody? Guten Tag, AGGM 1992. Dani Alves returns. Yeah, how are the cats? The cats are contained. So they're wonderful, but they love cables, and they particularly like cables that are attached to my laptop, and they particularly like cables that are attached to my laptop at a time when I'm recording or trying to concentrate. So regrettably, maybe we'll try them again next week to see if they'll behave during it. Sound good? Sound goof? Sigh? Sound good? Sounds very good. Okay, like a little bit of housekeeping before we get going. Actually, I was gonna ask for hands up for who saw Portugal against Serbia. I don't think that's gonna work on a live stream. Anyway, that Mitrovic header. Okay, so that's like your classic Alexander Mitrovic back post, rising above a defender kind of header. But if you think about how difficult that is, because Dusan Tadic floats the ball into the back post, that's an in-swinging ball. And like we've all been there. Like when you try and head a ball that's coming at that angle, and it kind of slips off your forehead and just goes out for a corner, and you look like an idiot. But it's just to get that much power into the ground, not last kick of the game, but like kind of crucial moment of the game, going to stoppage time. It's going to be the last proper chance of the match. Joe didn't see that one. Joe, you don't watch football. Like, there was someone in the podcast comments who asked whether you'd ever seen a football match. We don't know. We're going to have to get back to that one. But brilliant header. Not so good. I don't suppose anybody saw this. I've put it on my Twitter profile for those who do. The penalty decision in the South Africa-Ghana game is incredible. It's absolutely incredible. It's not that it's bad, and it's not one of those where you look at it and you think, that's just not a penalty. You don't even know what he's given it for. So when we're done here, go and have a look at that, because it's bizarre. I think we'll bizarre. That's the kindest way to describe it. Okay, we're getting more and more people in. So let's talk about two main topics today. It's going to be slightly shorter. We'll do two topics. Joe will call me, order me to plug the Athletic, and then we'll move into some of the questions. First of all, let's talk about Dani Alves and his return to Barcelona, because it's quite a nice story, but there are layers to it. And then I wanted to talk about Gareth Bale, because he reached his 100 cap for Wales over the weekend in Wales's win over Belarus. And it's an interesting topic, and not in the kind of, what's the situation at Real Madrid, because I think we've all done that far too many times. Yes, Snorlax has seen it, exactly. South Africa were robbed. But Bale, I don't know. I want to think about what Bale will be in 10, 15, 20 years. When people think about him and think about his career, we will, who will Gareth Bale be to us? But let's start with Alves, because it's interesting. Like last week we spoke about one of the issues that Xavi's going to have, which is, as head coach, eventually, if he's going to be there for any length of time, he's going to have to move on players like Gerard Piqué and Jordi Alba and Sergio Busquets. And that's quite tricky when you've been friends and when you've shared a dressing room with players, to then have a slightly different role and to kind of exert an authority over them. That's a pretty awkward dynamic. But Alves coming back, like superficially, that seems to add to it, because it's like another guy from that generation who's associated with winning, who is a little bit more than just a first team player. But I really like it for a few reasons. Most obviously because like Barcelona at right back have been not bad, but not great for a really long time, and that's probably partly due to the fact that Alves was a really rare player, because no one would describe him as a fullback really. Like, he played there, but the range of things he could do was just absolutely amazing. I always think of I think it was at Parc des Princes against PSG, and I think Leo Messi scored it. This kind of waft of an outside right pass that he cut through the PSG defence. Absolutely amazing ball. And there are very few players, very few fullbacks in history that could have ever played that ball. So him coming back, he's not coming back as 28-year-old Dani Alves who will help them win a Champions League. He's 38 years old. He's older than me. So it's a short-term thing. But for anyone who's ever heard him interviewed and heard him talk about football generally, he's massively enthusiastic, has sort of boundless energy for the game, but also about what Barcelona were under Guardiola and briefly under Tito Villanova. Like even though he didn't come through at Barcelona, was signed from Sevilla, of course, he has a passion for that way of playing. And I think this is during a period of restoration when you're trying to kind of you're trying to put a club back on course essentially and reattach it to its ideology. I think that's a fair way of looking at what Xavi will be expected to do. I think it's very useful to have people who manager on the field, coach on the field is a bit of a cliche. I don't really want to put it that way, but someone who is a kind of another steward for that way of thinking, for another advocate for that way of playing. And I think if you think about the young players in that team, so obviously Gavi, Pedri. By the way, Gavi was fantastic tonight. If you haven't watched the Spain-Sweden game, watch his performance. Like, just amazing. He seems to have just been dropped into senior football and looks like he's been playing there for a decade. Absolutely amazing. But if you've got these players in that team, so sort of Gavi, Pedri, Nico's another one that is clearly going to have a very big future. Alejandro Balde, the fullback on the left side, or possibly plays a little bit of winger. Even Ansu Fati, like to have an Alves-like figure, like a Gareth type, but also someone associated with a different era, someone who has lived someone who's lived the life that a lot of these Barcelona players will now want to be living themselves, if that makes sense. That's a really useful commodity. But also, he still has value as a player because he is not, he's clearly well beyond his best. But if you think about literally what Barcelona are, which is central defence, not great, both fullback positions, Jordi Alba beyond his best, Serginho Dest is still learning, is quite a good player, could be a very good one, is somewhere in between those 2 points at the moment. So everything out wide at Barcelona and from the back is a little bit ropey. And yet further upfield and more centrally in the interior, you have a really interesting group of players. And I think what modern football is kind of like a half-baked theory, but I think fullbacks has never been more important than they are right now. Look at sort of all the great teams over the last couple of years. A lot of the impact has come from those positions. So Alexander-Arnold and Robertson at Liverpool. Think of Alphonso Davies's breakout at Bayern Munich and Joshua Kimmich's effect from right back when he's played there. He's not a full-time right back, of course. He's a world-class central midfielder. But you get the point. Like without the tactical positional discipline and without the energy and without the ability, really, from fullback, you don't really have much of a chance. And if you put Alves as a right back, clearly he's not going to play 30 games between now and the end of the season, but he's like a living tutorial, isn't he? If you're managing Serginho Dest and you want to impart upon him the importance of a fullback, in the modern game, but also in this Barcelona system. Remember, Dest didn't grow up at Barcelona; he's an Ajax player. Then you could do a lot worse than have him train with Dani Alves or share minutes with Dani Alves. Even at this stage of his career, it's a privilege. And also there's if you for anyone who hasn't seen it, the documentary Take the Ball, Pass the Ball, listen to Alves. There's the translation if you don't speak Spanish or but listen to him talk about that time. That's just a very infectious energy that you're putting into a dressing room. So just a good story, but a really useful thing. And I dare say Barcelona have been pretty short of positives over the last couple of years, and this is clearly one of them. Okay, Bale, because it's tricky. Bale, I've always actually really enjoyed the way that that he's talked about his country. I know it's got him into trouble, and the flag and the Wales golf Madrid thing and the way the Madrid press treated that. I get it. and he might have been a little bit smarter than that. But if you think about the generation before Gareth Bale, and particularly Welsh players, if you think about how they weren't part-time, but Wales is a little bit of an afterthought. I always think of, Ryan Giggs' relationship with the Welsh national team and how it was very much Man United first and, Wales second. And if you look up how many caps he actually won for his country, I think that kind of backs that point up. So Bale's enthusiasm for Wales is a great thing, and it's allowed them to achieve things that they never would have done otherwise. But it's got to a point where you think Bale's club career has been very part-time for a couple of years, and it's felt as if he's been locked into it. He's been a prisoner of his own contract's decadence. That's a very privileged situation to be in, of course, and difficult to kind of not to envy that. But at the same time, you wonder whether the consequence of this is that Bale has won 4 European Cups, and he's responsible for some absolutely amazing moments. Like far beyond just things like the bicycle kick against Liverpool and Kiev, he has as many signature moments in English football as all but the very, very best players to play in the Premier League. He never really emerged from Cristiano Ronaldo's shadow in the Real Madrid team, and when Ronaldo left, Benzema picked up the mantle, and so Bale was kind of caught between eras. He was never the main guy, and that's obviously been a problem. But you wonder, despite all of this, if we had this conversation in 10 years, 15, 20 years, and we're thinking about great players from different eras, and we go beyond the obvious ones, the Messis, Ronaldos, etc., and you start talking about impact players. When you get to Gareth Bale, it really interests me what people will say, because it's like this sort of second or third act of his career, this sort of golden handcuffs, winding down his contract in Spain part has been to the detriment of how he'll be remembered, because you saw when he came back on loan last season, you saw what a good player he still was. He was never really fit under Jose Mourinho. Jose Mourinho used him in a very strange way initially, and seemed to have a falling out with him around the time of the North London derby. Not a personal falling out, just a kind of a tactical disagreement. And then he had that kind of little flourish on the last day of the season where he sort of cut through Leicester's defence a couple of times and put Spurs in the Conference League, whatever that's worth. But you saw, get this guy fully fit, and okay, he's not at the very, very top of the game, but he is still someone that's capable of contributing at a very, very high level. And yet, that's just not what you think of with him. And it's always been, to me, there's always been a conflict between, I want to see Gareth Bale play for as long as possible and for as well as possible. And the temptation is to knock or criticise somebody who likes football, maybe loves it, but also has other interests. Gareth Bale is obviously very close to his family. He likes his golf, of course. And on the one hand, he's received a lot of criticism, and it's a very easy thing to do. But on the other, a professional's career is their business. And so you're torn between thinking, right, well, it's fair enough that he's led his career this way, and why shouldn't he earn as much as he possibly can? But then what is the effect on legacy? And I understand modern fans get absolutely obsessed with legacy, and we start talking about legacy from the age of about 23, 24 onwards. It's very, very boring. But Bale does genuinely occupy a very awkward place, and I think it will become more awkward. And it's just interesting. It's sad, because I remember watching him when he came through at Spurs, and he was thrilling. I've never seen a player hold their acceleration. I've seen quicker players, but I've never seen a player reach top speed and then hold that speed for 60, 70 yards. And he was such a spectacle. And it's a shame that sort of instead of those moments and that amazing goal he scored against Stoke, don't know who remembers that, or the many goals he scored in the Andre Villas-Boas season, or the Champions League winners medals, the 2 goals he scored in those finals. Instead of that, you get golf and lols and isn't it funny and banter, and it's kind of feels wrong for a player of that class. Oh, I'm getting WhatsApp messages from Joe Devine. Joe wants to know, this is our first question night, and it's come from Joe, weirdly. Joe wants to know why he went back to Madrid. It seems to me that Spurs, I don't think he really wanted to stay in England, and I don't think Spurs were interested in the kind of the financial aspect of it. check that though. That might be a question to ask Joe Devine, not Joe Devine, Jack Pitt-Brooke and Charlie Eccleshare over the Athletic. Here is Joe Devine. I'm going to put him on speakerphone. Joe Devine, you're speaking to the world. Hello. You are on speakerphone.
Hey, what up, Seth? How's it going?
It's going really well. How are you?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
I thought you were doing a good job.
Thank you.
Interested in the Bale stuff. I saw someone ask a question about what you thought about the future of Ireland under, not the country, the football team. Less difficult question. Under Kenny.
I don't know. I don't think I know anything about Ireland.
Call you and ask you a really difficult question.
Well, because when you said future of Ireland, like I didn't go football. I just thought like politics.
Will Ireland be unified again in the future?
I felt like that's one of those that you and I say for our kind of late night phone conversations, which are not being broadcast live. That's a little bit easier.
Yes, it's one not for the live stream.
It's one we can speculate.
To remind you to tell people that if they visit theathletic.com/TIFO-IRL, they'll be able to get a fantastic 30-day free trial to try The Athletic. And can I say to you, Seb, that this weekend for me, no more was it ever sort of proven as to why that would be worthwhile than David Ornstein and Michael Bailey's work on the Dean Smith appointment at Norwich, which I know to many Premier League fans is small fry news. But given the sort of strange news week as it applied to Norwich, I thought the way that The Athletic reported on that was absolutely fantastic, and to be there first too.
They were there first, absolutely. If you wanted to subscribe to The Athletic, Joe, where might one do that?
Well, in the link I already said.
Yeah, but there's no real harm in sort of...
Well done. Saying it again, theathletic.com/TIFO-IRL. Now, I want to inform the listeners today that they can ask you questions. We've got another sort of 15 minutes here to be asked questions for Seb, so get your questions in the chat, gang, and I will pick them out and WhatsApp them to Seb. Now, Seb, last week what happened is that you ignored my WhatsApps and you just picked them out of the chat yourself. That's fine. Remember to read the name and the question in full before you answer it.
Okay.
And start with Dean Smith at Norwich, please, because I'm quite excited about that.
Bye. Hey, I'm going to defy him. I will get to Dean Smith at Norwich, but I saw Brendan ask me in the comments why I watch international football. Because that's a really good question. I think because I like the level of competition. If you think about your average Premier League weekend or your average La Liga or Bundesliga weekend, generally what you get is games which are fought on something other than an even playing field. So you might get Bayern Munich against somebody or Manchester United against Brighton, and those games are great. I love the Premier League and I love the Bundesliga, but in international football, I think it's far easier to find games which are very, very even, and also contain a lot of players that you don't know anything about, that I don't know anything about, or players who are decent in their domestic leagues but actually very important or very good for their country. And you kind of have this joy of watching them in an entirely different context. Hey, good example, Alexander Mitrovic, good player for Fulham, somewhere between a really, really good Championship player and quite a good Premier League player. For Serbia, he's just unbelievable. If you look at some of his goals over the past year, it's been they are almost two different players. So that's why I watch it, Brendan. So Dean Smith at Norwich, a really, really good appointment, because if you go back to the point at which Dean Smith took over Villa, I know it hasn't ended that well, but if you think about what he did to the fan base, the kind of the belief that he infused Villa Park with, he quite literally filled up Villa Park, which was pretty empty during the kind of the period of time where Villa sort of started circling the Premier League drain, went down to the Championship, almost got up, didn't, and he's a smart guy. He's a good coach. I don't know quite what Norwich's game plan is. Like I don't quite understand what the aim is of the football club, what the business model. That's not meant to be disparaging. I don't know whether Dean Smith is going there with the expectation to go down, reset, and go up again. I'm not sure, or whether he is in there just to stabilise and get the most out of these players and try and survive at any cost. I don't know. I think maybe January will tell us, because I think if there's the pattern of recruitment in January will tell us. But I like it. I certainly like it more than let's give Frank Lampard another job because he was Frank Lampard. That didn't make an awful lot of sense. It was kind of strange how he withdrew from consideration. So we've got more. Nathan Giles asks, would it make sense for Ligue 1, the Eredivisie, the Belgian league to merge so it can actually compete with bigger leagues? Nathan, good question. And it's something which comes up periodically, and there's a plus and a minus to this. Firstly, yeah, you create a really, really strong league out of the cream of those divisions. So if you were to chuck, for instance, PSG, Marseille, Ajax Feyenoord, PSV, Anderlecht, Genk, Ghent into one league, you get something that I think is a little bit easier to, a little bit more competitive. On the other side, though, what happens to if you're merging leagues? That means that you're creating a division between the teams that you want and the teams that you don't. So what then happens to the teams that you don't? Say you cut off below 10th in each division, and you put all the teams in either a second tier 3-nation league, or you make that the new national league. You're creating something which would be starved of television rights, because no one wants to watch that because it would be a diminished product. B, you would create a talent drain out of those domestic markets. So like if you were, I don't know, Rennes or Saint Etienne, you would have next to no chance to keep your very, very best players, because they'd all want to go and play we need to come up with a name for that. Not Benelux but Better Frank League. That. And it's the same. It's the same problem as the Super League, just in a slightly smaller form. And also, listen, the other thing is, it would create a slightly more competitive division. Yes, definitely. Is it actually something people would want to watch? Is it something they would want to watch in the sense that Amazon would pay a lot of money to broadcast it? I still don't know. I don't see that group. I wouldn't see that group compete with Serie A or the Premier League or La Liga or even the Bundesliga, because it's just I don't know. I'm not sure it makes it a premier product. But a good question, though. The back post asks, what's the best player Newcastle can realistically attract? What is in caliber or who, I suppose. I think they're shopping in the kind of what we'll broadly term the James Tarkowski market, because you've got one problem. You've got more than one problem. The first is that what the Premier League table looks like now. Also, Eddie Howe is a good coach, but there will be doubts about what he can do within that structure. So when you come to recruit, what are you selling a player? You're saying, right, well, come and play for us. We're 19th, and we've got this guy he's been out of the game for a while, and we're not sure about. We haven't got a director of football, and we don't have an awful lot of footballing IQ in the club at the moment. So you're not going to go out and you can't just throw money at really, really good players. You go through that phase of overpaying for decent Premier League types who are just going to keep you in the division to start with. So you might go for a Tarkowski. You might have a punt at a Harry Winks on loan. You might look at, I don't know. I mean, he seems to be being integrated back into the first team now. But previously, you'd think, what about an Ainsley Maitland-Niles? Good player who come in, rebuild his reputation, good Premier League experience. That would have been quite interesting. But there's not going to be you're not going to march an army of Kylian Mbappes into St James's Park in January. It's just not going to happen. And also, one of the things that's worth paying attention to is the sums of money. So it was reported before the weekend that Eddie Howe has been promised £200 million over the next 3 years, which sounds like a lot of money until you break it into different transfer windows, because that's not a lot of money. That's maybe 2 very good players or 2 good players within each window. So it's not going to be like Man City. It's not going to be like Chelsea when Abramovich first got there. It's going to be a slightly different project even. Joe says, 92 Flamethrower says, since Levy doesn't like signing players on the older side, would Neves be a good alternative to Brozovic? No, I think I don't think they're one or the other players. I think Neves has gone a little bit backwards as well. Like he's plateaued a little bit at Wolves. I don't know why that is. Very, very good player, but I don't think he has quite the range of distribution that Brozovic does. I think Brozovic is a super player. And also Neves, I don't know. I think I think I know what you're getting at with Levy, but I think it's you go for your Brozovic or you go for your sort of 20, 21-year-old guy. And obviously Ruben Neves is kind of between those two. And I think would come for a very, very large fee. And I don't know, not one I'd be desperately eager to pay. And I don't know whether he really works in Antonio Conte's system. Because what is he? If you work on the basis that Conte eventually is going to have probably two central midfielders, does he provide the security for Højbjerg? Does he do what Ndombele does? Can he be what Lo Celso is? Is he that kind of rugged type that Oliver Skip is? I don't know. I'm not sure what he is. I don't know whether you can play him in that system. I think if you're in a more sort of traditional 4-3-2-1, I think maybe. But I don't know. We're still working out what Conte Spurs is going to look like. So let's hold fire on that one. James Garrett asks, oh, my brother just says thank you. It's my brother's birthday today. Happy birthday. He lives in Colombia. Anyway, James Garrett asks, how do you assess Kane's lack of goals this season so far? I assess it, James, as being typical of what Harry Kane looks like when he's not quite fit. So this is like an annual event, isn't it? Like you get Kane sort of goes through he's either recovering from injury or he's a bit knackered after a long summer or something similar. And you go through this 6 weeks where everyone goes, oh, there's no goals and he's not having any shots. And, maybe this is the point at which it all starts to decline. And then invariably he does what he did over the weekend, which is score a hat-trick, and then the conversation resets itself. I think it genuinely is a fitness issue. I think the events of the summer, and not just his arrival back late for pre-season, I think the strain of what happened and self-imposed strain, he created a lot of the drama that happened, let's be fair. But Kane's always been someone that prefers to focus entirely, almost religiously on the sport. He moved house so he can live closer to the Tottenham training ground. That's how dedicated this player is. And so when you add ingredients which are things like uncertainty or transfer speculation or dissatisfaction, or in Tottenham's case, no one knew who the manager was going to be until just before pre-season started. So, it's not entirely Kane's fault. But he'll be fine because he always is. And we always make this mistake, me included. You always sort of start to worry and think, he's not the player he was and you need to replace him and should have sold him to Man City. It's another one I hear. Whether Man City actually offered what they're rumored to have offered, I don't really agree. But give it 6 weeks. Let's do this again. Let's do this again before Christmas. Have this conversation again before Christmas. I'm pretty sure it'll be different. Jordan Jackson asks, what do you make of so many England players pulling out of the international squad? Jordan, I think it's pretty typical. It's just what happens. It's especially what happens if you've got San Marino away on a midweek, because clubs, the relationship between a national team and a club, especially in England, is very fraught. It's one of compromise, and it's one of, I don't really want him doing this, and does he need to be here? And when there's a sort of a slight injury, muscle tweak, or I think Declan Rice pulled out with a bit of illness over the weekend. Could be wrong. I think so. Then this is what happens, and it's just the reality of it. These are very, very expensive assets, and when you've got dead rubber games against San Marino, and you're already qualified for the World Cup, I haven't really got a problem with it. It's happened forever. Scully, I have spoke about Gavi. I think he's just a fabulous player. I will release this as a video as soon as the live stream finishes. We talked about him right at the beginning. Hello, Joe. Can you ask Seb who is the best replacement for Solskjaer? We did this a little bit last week, so let's not dwell on that. But I think it's a moot point because I don't think there's going to need to be one soon, because I don't think Man United are going to make a change. One more question, because we are. I've been in bed for most of the weekend, and my voice is going. So Steve asks, what do you think of the Harry Maguire celebration? I winced at it, but I'm not a fan of his in general and wish he wasn't United captain. I don't have any strong opinions about Harry Maguire, Steve. I just thought the celebration was weird because, first of all, are you cupping your ear to the crowd, or are you blocking the crowd out? Like, are you listening to the critics and shutting them up, or are you just not listening to them at all? So get that straight. And then also, Harry Maguire has been criticising Harry Maguire recently. Like, he's like a lot of Man United players, he's done that mea culpa where he's talked about it's not good enough, and he's done that fronting up thing that modern athletes love to do, where they come in front of the camera and start saying, well, we've got to do this and this and this. And so Harry Maguire is his own critic. So he's was Harry Maguire hitting back at himself? And also, it's okay to criticise players. If a player doesn't play well and their form is poor, hey, we've got a really good video on Man United's defence coming out on the Tifo Illustrated channel tomorrow. It's written by Mark Carey. There's a fascinating little sort of analytic deep dive that he does on Maguire. So check that out. It'll be releasing at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning UK time. But yeah, it was weird, wasn't it? It made me wince too, Steve. And Joe asks, Joe's the boss, I have to answer his question. He wants to know if Newcastle stay up. I think they probably do, Joe, because I think the calibre of player they're able to bring in, all those caveats aside that we talked about, I think the calibre of player that they're able to bring in probably just about keeps them in the division, and that's the important thing for them. So yeah, I would expect so. I think they need cover for Callum Wilson. I think they need a little bit between the midfield and the forward line. Big old problem there. There's been a chasm between those two departments for a really long time, and they probably need a little bit of investment at fullback and centre half. And a couple of midfielders wouldn't hurt either. But yeah, I think they'll probably just about stay. Okay, guys, thank you very, very much. I hope you enjoyed it. Enjoy what's left of your weekend. Have a good week, and keep a lookout for stuff on the Tifo channels over the course of the next few days. Bye-bye.